What's up, guys? Back again for another episode, and today Sae'Von and I are going to go in on diet. Going to go into some fads. We're going to go into some different types of nutrient breakdowns. We're going to go into the need for a relationship with food that you dictate, because at the end of the day, diet might not even be the right word. Your relationship with food, because you can let society or individuals or ubiquitous assimilation dictate your diet, or you can decide the relationship that you're going to have with food. I'm going to throw this over to Sae'Von, and we're going to start it off with, let's run down maybe the different types of relationships that there are with food. And this could even go more macro than just the types of quote-unquote diets.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you. And so one thing that I know some of my Rastafari brothers will appreciate, they don't call them diets, they call it live-its. Because why would you want to have a diet and not a live-it? And so I think that would be maybe one of the first ways that I know it's like you've never heard that. Wow. It sounds super funny, but you're like, damn, that makes sense. And so y'all think about that in terms of who created this food pyramid and who created the word diet, right? So anyhow, I just thought that'd be a funny thing to really tie it in, though, because at a baseline, there's so many different ways to eat. Like you said, it's all about a unique relationship with it. Just like not everybody's going to dress the same, not everybody's going to speak the same way. Not everybody needs to eat the exact same way. What would be the fun of life if you couldn't express your own personality, your own preferences, likes, dislikes through what you eat? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you literally are what you eat. If you've done nothing, I like to make this example to people, because sometimes folks, if y'all don't know, I have been plant-based for 5+ years at this point. And people will often assume one way or the other that any type of diet, live it, is better than another. So, keto diet, good, bad, vegan, good, bad, pescatarian, good, bad, carnivore, good, bad, omnivore, good, bad, when it's far more nuanced than that. You could be a plant-based observer, eat nothing but Oreos for 5 years. That means for those 5 years, your body built everything from Oreo. You are an Oreo. But if you did nothing but eat kale, you are kale, right? And you shouldn't only eat any one thing. That's another good foundation for a live-it. I'm going to try to see if I can say live it every time instead of diet the rest of this episode. It might
just have to title it live it.
Yeah. But to that point, your live it should be something you can incorporate and make a lifestyle, because that's the only way to make it sustainable. I remember for years people be like, damn, you're still vegan? I'd be like, first of all, stop saying vegan, bruh. It sounds like a cult. I am plant-based, and I am the vegan heathen. So do keep in mind, if I wanted to go eat me a shrimp po' boy right now, I would, if I felt that urge. I don't, and there are other reasons for it, but that's the whole thing. The live it, the lifestyle should be holistic. You'll notice that historically, people often eat what is available. So if you live in a coastal region, guess what? It's highly likely you're going to eat a lot more food that comes from the ocean than somebody that lives in the plains in the middle of America, right, where there's a lot of grain. And it needs to be something you can sustain. So it doesn't need to be something that you're trying to sprint through and suffer through, for the next 2 months, 3 months, so you can be beach ready. It needs to be something that you could do today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, for the rest of your life. And that is going to give you a good indication on if what you're doing, in my opinion, is healthy long-term. Because if you cannot sustain it long-term, there's some sort of issue there, whether it's the volume of the food you're trying to eat for people who are trying to bulk up, right? And they're trying to shove down 4,000 calories a day, thinking they're the Rock, and you're not in the NFL and there's no reason for you to be 200 pounds, and you're feeling digestive issues from trying to take in that many calories. Maybe pull back and take a slow and steady approach, and same on people only eating one or two things. You need variety, you need all these different things. And I've definitely meandered and done a shotgun approach. But first point, it should be something you can sustain long-term. It should be whole food based regardless of how you're approaching it. And you want to incorporate a balance. You want living foods in your diet. I ain't saying you got to go out here and become a Rost, because that can actually cause gastrointestinal issues for people as well, because of phthalates and all these other things. And it's like you got to get in the weeds to really know these things are things. But You want living food, whole food, a variety of colors, shapes, macros, and you should be able to sustain it.
Yeah, and I think we're going to dive in a little bit to why you are plant-based and why people would smack the vegan stamp on your forehead if they could, to just keep you, identified like they'd like you, because you don't eat meat. And I think it's interesting, and I think live it, it's a very interesting term. I think that live it could refer to things that would actually be a lifestyle, though, because if you really think about it, most diets are short-term crash courses out here where people are like, oh, I've got a wedding, I need to go keto to lose 20 pounds. Oh, I need to put on a sweatsuit and I need to just run and have my juice cleanse. And I don't know if people understand that your body can detoxify itself. I don't know when we got into the space where, it was cool to just start doing, celery cleanses. There's, I don't know if you've ever done a celery cleanse. I don't know if you've ever done a juice cleanse. Arden's Garden, love y'all. Some of y'all's drinks are great, but have you ever peed out your backside?
And you get to the facts.
Because juicing, I tell you what, that, goodness, juicing everything, trying to go 24, 48, 72 hours on just juice. Well, that'll have you feeling some type of way. I'll tell you what. That is not a live it. That is definitely a diet. Kill that off now. Do not do it. The juicing, it works for some people.
Oh, man.
Sweet. Doesn't work for me. I won't be doing it ever again. I have no interest to spend that much time with the porcelain god. Period. No desire. But let's digress a little bit back to, let's come back around to where we were going. Plant-based. Why plant-based for you? What have you seen performance-wise? You don't have to go, I want you to touch on the ethics and the morals a little bit.
High level.
For sure. But then I want you to talk about performance. I want to talk about carryover for you specifically, being someone that traditionally has been athletic, has been involved in athletics. What have you seen that for you? For anyone that doesn't understand, I know he just said this a minute ago. You might have forgotten after we just went on a tangent. Sae'Von is plant-based and has been 4 years, 5 years?
I'll stop counting. I think 2016 is when I made the
yeah.
transition.
So, just coming up on 6 years,
Yeah.
So,
really, initially it was, that's the funny thing with me. Most of my diet was plant-based, but I was eating copious amounts of chicken breast. So UJ got on meal plan, and I was like, oh, I can eat as much of this as I want, and at that point, that was like, I was kind of going into like this phase where I was putting on some muscle mass pretty quickly because I had enough food to eat, it's like no knock to, how I grew up, but we didn't always have all the food there to just eat it, for the sake of gaining size. But at UGA, I was given that gift. It cost a penny, but that meal plan was something serious. So it was really as I started doing some more research on just preventative measures to get a lower likelihood of experiencing certain complications or diseases down the road, because there are some people in my family who have a history of some different ailments and diseases. And so I was just trying to get in front of that. And as I did more and more research, and then when I started to see some of the ethic dilemmas with the approach of eating other animals, other beings. Now, some people are, well, you're still killing plants. Yes, but...
Now, when you say the ethical implications there, are we talking about commercialized farming? Are we talking about farming?
Thank you.
What are we talking about there? Because I know the hunters will come for all of us on this podcast.
Thank you. Because I do always make that distinction, because for me, I did not grow up... Now, my family on my father's side has owned a farm for over, 50, 60, 70 years. My great-grandfather on my father's side, he was one of the first black men in Georgia with land, had thousands or hundreds of acres, sold some of it to Douglas County. So he had horses, cows, chickens, all of that. But after he passed on, we stopped really being in that energy of really living, like a farmer would. And so I feel like farmers and hunters, they're in a very similar category in the sense that they're day to day in touch with that animal. And it was never commercial farming. It was literally he looked and watched after every animal. But I never had that experience growing up. I never went hunting. I never really went through that initiation of that whole process of this is what it is like to take an animal's life. This is the things you need to be respectful of. And then once we do this, this is how our community and how we're going to leverage and use every piece of that animal to the best of our ability to not be wasteful. That is literally a 180-degree opposition to commercial farming, commercial agriculture. They literally forcibly inseminate these animals. They keep them separated from their children. They put them in conveyor belts. They kill them. Their whole life is agony and suffering. When you hunt an animal, its whole life is freedom until that last moment if you're a good hunter and you can put it down the right way. And then those hunters go on and they use the animal to its fullness the best they can. They use the skin if they can. They make clothes out of it. The people who went hunting with them, they'll split that animal, they'll stock their extra freezers, and they'll be using that meat for months. Whereas with commercial farming, there's that distance. And most people who eat meat, this is like a test I kind of put out to people. Could you go kill an animal and eat it? If your answer is no, you shouldn't be eating animals. Or you should acclimate yourself. If you really feel you need meat, well, you better learn how to go kill it yourself, because ultimately there's also that side of it. I know that I can grow food that I can eat. I can't grow an animal and I don't go hunt. That's not a skill I have. But people who do hunt, that's a skill that they have. So if Tyson shut down production in America, right? If for some reason they wanted to play psychological warfare and punish the United States because Tyson is not an American-owned company and they wanted to shut off the food supply, there's a lot of people who only rely on the meat they get that is industrially produced and made, and that is not sustainable at scale. The other issue is the quality of it. Because of the cortisol and the stress that these animals go through in their life and the hormones and all this other crazy shit they pump them with to try to make them big quickly, it is also one of the reasons that there's this link that people have found and has been demonstrated between cancer rates and disease and the consumption of animal meat. Here's the fact that some vegans or some plant-based people don't really want to talk about that often. You can't run that same study at scale for wild hunted meat, because there's not enough of it to get to run that test. You can't really find and reproduce those conditions, even just from a licensure standpoint of how many animals are allowed to be killed during any given season. So I only bring that up to make the point that so often, and as I started this out, people connect or link disease and cancer to meat consumption, but that's only been studied with commercial meat. And so I knew for me, well, I'm only eating commercial meat, so let me cut that out my diet. But in the future, when I have land and I'm building out something that's sustainable, I have no doubts that I will reconsider my position and almost certainly look at having some chickens. You know what I mean? Cows, I don't know. That's a whole lot of work specifically, but
it takes a lot of money to raise a cow too.
A lot of money, right?
And a lot of care and a lot of like a ton more than just feed on the ground.
Exactly.
Chickens picking up their poop.
They're pretty low key, So I'm just acknowledging that business side of it. And I don't mean to be too long-winded, but basically just making that distinction that when you go out and you hunt an animal yourself, there are more differences than similarities to the industrial agriculture component of it. And most people, I would argue, 90+% of people, particularly in America, but even worldwide, do not get their animals that they consume naturally. And that's primarily in the advanced or the declining world versus the ascending world, where most of it is far more connected. And that was just something that I wanted to escape, because unless I was going to make that pivot to hunting my own animals, which I was not about to do, being a junior at UGA, I wasn't going to just all of a sudden pick up this skill and become Hawkeye, So I said, all right, what can I do? I can cut this out, because of my moral, ethical, reservations about it, and seeing the health ramifications of this industrial, genetically modified meat, and free range, all these things are marketing terms. It's not really any better. If you're not getting it from the person who killed it, who hunted that animal, it's almost certainly industrially produced. And as such, It is full with a lot of very toxic chemicals that aren't good for the animal. The animal lived its life in suffering, and that energy transitions from that animal to you. Last thing I'll say, a lot of people don't understand why like Wagyu beef and all that type of crazy beef that's like, $100+ steaks. What people don't understand is that they get that buttery texture because these animals literally have a massage therapist that rubs it multiple times a week, and they're allowed to just live in this happiness. And so they have very low cortisol levels. That makes their meat more supple because they didn't live a life of stress. And there's not that many of them because they need a lot of space, which is why supply and demand economics, they're super expensive. But that's why that beef and that meat, that steak is the best stuff. And I've never had it, but it's the best meat most people have ever eaten because it's the best well-treated meat they've ever eaten.
Yeah. Okay, so that's why he went plant-based. That's that's a lot. Have you experimented with any other type of livets other than being plant-based? Outside of being omnivore when you were going through the football thing and that, have you experimented with any like keto, doing the Whole30 or anything like that?
Yeah, and disclaimer, that really wasn't even why. I just figured I needed to answer more fully. We were on that segment about beef, so there'll be some reels about that, no doubt. But that wasn't the full reason. The back half of that is superpowers. I won't get deeply into it, but when you detoxify your body extensively, it allows the innate qualities that you already have to become more dominant. So clairvoyance, clairaudience, premonitions, some people it gets into telekinesis, this sort of stuff, but your body is better able to allow those natural aspects, those, extrasensory perception abilities to become dominant because it's not suppressed and weighed down by heavy metals, as much toxicity, chemicals. But once again, that's not just from animal products, that's from processed, foods, and that could be vegan processed foods. Oreos are not going to help you see the future. You know what I mean? So that's why I made the point about pivoting. And so to your point, have I really jumped into some other bucket? No. I looked at doing the keto thing at one point in time, just because I was looking at all these cognitive benefits people said that they were experiencing on top of it. But my diet was already very heavy in fats. So, Doug Sr. used to joke, he's like, man, you might be ketogenic already. And I'm like, I eat too many oats for that probably. I don't limit my carb intake. Yeah. But no, personally, I haven't really jumped down anything because for me, it's always been about the goal of maintaining a diet that is, 80% or more whole foods based and trying to make sure there's a big proportion of that to cruciferous vegetables, leafy greens. That's why I have so many smoothies. It's an easy way to incorporate greens in there versus just every day having to shovel, bushels of kale or broccoli or something else like that.
Eating off the stalk out here.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I'll admit these last few months, I've been the loosest with my diet that I've been in years, similar with my workout routine. But nevertheless, it still is fundamentally rooted in those whole food principles. So not Whole30 where I'm only eating those foods, but most of what I was eating probably was already in there. I just never went to go double check to make sure I was following, this new marketing scheme. I was just like, all right, is that the source or is that a derivative? Is that a sweet potato or is that a sweet potato chip? You know what I mean? And just kind of approaching it from that standpoint, which has led to some good results. And to get back to the initial question you posed about any differences I noticed from a performance standpoint. Now, when I was training in extensively in preparation to walk on at UGA, end of the story, I didn't make the team. But, it was the best in shape. It put me on a good track, and that's really when I got intense about the personal training stuff for a few years. What I noticed personally was recovery was a little bit faster, but you got to keep in mind, other than chicken breast, everything I was doing was the same. So I don't think that I have that as drastic of a change story as some people would, because everything I was doing was basically the exact same other than the chicken breast, and I replaced that with some vegan protein powder. I replaced it with some Gardein, and it wasn't Whole Foods, chicken tenders type things, and just figuring out ways to get more protein in, so it was more nuts afterwards. But I think what most people would tell you and what I still experience is recovery is pretty fast. I can go weeks without squatting and then squat 225, several sets of that. And yeah, my legs are hurting, for a day or so, but then I feel like I didn't do anything 3 days later. And so I don't know if that would necessarily be the same. So recovery is better. And yeah, man, I can't really give you any great quotables, bruh. You know what I'm saying? I know there's a lot of studies out there. There's a lot of people, some folks
Yep.
can follow if they want to look at people who literally are bodybuilders or even professional athletes that adhere to a plant-based diet. But typically, what you'll notice is faster recovery time, that you can eat less food and you'll be more satiated. So for a lot of people, their body composition improves because they're still getting the core nutrients that they need, but they're doing it in a denser format because there's a lot less filler if they're respecting the whole foods component of it. Clarity, you detox, so you just feel a little bit better.
No juice cleanses?
I never did any juice cleanses, man, because that's the thing. When you get some of these things out of your liver permanently, you get to detox, but you're not forcing your body to evacuate it all as many ways as it can in a shorter period of time, which can be very intense on the body and turn a lot of people off. Instead of me doing a celery cleanse, I started having celery every day in my smoothies. You know what I mean? And so
Start to introduce it, and so your body starts to shift
yes,
what it's processing, and over time, because you're not trying to run out the door with everything that you own on your back.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes some time, but it's probably a little bit more sustainable, and it's probably also something that's not as jarring to both your digestive tract and your mind, because you're like, whoa, what is happening?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Is like it's a gentle transition because unlike most people, I literally quit overnight. I saw this. I saw the documentary. I think it was called *Sapiens* or
Food Inc. Did you see that?
I saw parts of it, but that's not the one that made me switch. I think it was a documentary called *Sapiens*, but basically the whole premise was that the only reason usually that comes down to it that people justify eating meat is that they're a different species. Because it's not an intelligence thing, because we don't eat people with Down syndrome. It basically walks through all these arguments, and the last one standing is that it's a different species than you. So racism's not cool, sexism isn't cool, but it's all right to eat a chicken because it's a chicken. And I don't know, that just resonated with me at a deep level because I'm like, damn, that's some real game. And being black, you know what I'm saying, or being in the black community, black is not a nationality, it's not an ethnicity, but that's a different conversation.
Some people are going to run them all together.
Colorism is a thing, it's a trick. But anyhow, like I said, not a conversation for today. But that's a deep rabbit hole, boy. But it just put that in my consciousness in a way that I hadn't thought about it. So then I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the industrial agriculture component of it. And then I saw this dude named Ralph Smart on YouTube, Infinite Waters, and he made this video about things people won't tell you when you go vegan. And he was talking about how you get superpowers. And then he really explained it, and is what I was talking about, how when your body detoxes and your pineal gland can decalcify, and it allows your extrasensory abilities that are natural for all human beings to flourish, unsuppressed by the toxicity of these chemicals and these poisons that are in this food. A lot of times the meat specifically, I was like, damn it, it's too many reasons. I got to. And then overnight, that day, I never ate meat again, bro. So some part of me sometimes is like, damn, if I would have planned it, I would have went out with a bang and had a couple things that I would have wanted to have, but I don't regret the decision. But overnight, I cut out the chicken breast and the eggs. I had a lot of scrambled eggs.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that one day you don't reintroduce meat that's not raised the same way. It's not to say that one day you don't actually go hunt. It's not to say, who knows?
Who knows?
Right? There's infinite experiences out there, but I do know that you take a very hardline stance on commercialized farming, period, end of story. You're just not going to do it.
Yeah, no pun intended. I have no beef with anybody that goes and hunts their meat. I have the utmost respect for that. It's a skill I don't have, and it's literally a skill that could keep your family alive and sustained in the event of a shutdown of the commercial food systems, and particularly not people who hunt for fun. I think that's some bullshit. But people who hunt and then they use every single bit of that animal and they pay homage and respect to that animal, I have no problem with it, man. You know what I'm saying? Because it's done sustainably, or if they do it sustainably and with that respect. But as I've already said several times, most people, they're not getting down like that.
Most people are, I mean, if you said you had to kill the meat, they would say, okay, I guess I can't eat meat. Like if you physically were not allowed to eat meat, if the government said, hey, if you can't prove to us that you can kill the animal, then you can't have it. I think a whole lot more people wouldn't be eating meat.
Fact. And that alone is what I had to recognize about myself. You know what I mean? And so it's like, until I make that transition point, if I were to ever make it, you know, it's just too many red flags for me. And once again, the crux of that is sustainability and how it is done. And that commercial agricultural system, even for plants and vegetables, is not sustainable. Most of the fruits and vegetables that you go to the store and Publix, there's a warning that they put up top telling you that it's covered in wax. You know, that they dye this stuff to make it, you know, retain its color and all these other things. There'll be plastic films on them and all of this. And, you know, that's really why I started Chi Greens, was I was like, you know what? At this point, I'm not prepared to make such a life transition where I'm just spending my whole life being farmer Sae'Von and growing everything that I eat. But I can start with something as simple as this, microgreens, you know, that can grow
Nutrient
from zero
dense,
to nutrient dense as all get out. And for me, that was me putting my money where my mouth was, of like, okay, same way that a hunter who goes out and hunts the deer deserves, in my opinion, has the right to eat that deer. Well, shoot, I want to be growing my food so that I also am not fully reliant upon Kroger or Sprouts or Trader Joe's, you know, and ultimately trusting that when they tell me that it is non-GMO organic, that it actually is, because we're making that discernment based on the label they put on it. And who knows, it's real easy to switch, you know, a 1 for a 2, a 2 for a 1. Ultimately, that's counterparty risk that I am trusting that is actually true, because I'm not taking it back home and running experiments on it to prove if there was any residual bits of Roundup on it. So I'm like, you know what? Let me grow this shit myself. I know what's in it, you know, and I'm building a skill set. So
yeah, controlling what you can control, and then kind of, I mean, looking to a body to control something else. And I mean, until you can control all of it, then, you know, you can only do what you can do. But you can pick what you are going to partake in and what you're not. And I believe that this episode, we're about to wrap up here, but this episode was going to be more on Live It. But we kind of dove in a little bit to plant-based and kind of broke down a few things about detoxes and whatnot too. And so we will definitely be circling back on Diet or Live It, whichever one you want. Again, because I think that there's some, you know, just some riffing, regardless of what path you want to take, keto, plant-based, vegan, omnivore, carnivore, whatever. There's a lot of things that you could use to apply to a lot of different scenarios, because everyone is different. And autoimmune diseases also warrant diets that are a little bit out of the norm as well. And that's some stuff that neither of us are autoimmune disease doctors. But there is evidence to support that those also deviate from the norm. You know, it's not your regular omnivore diet. So, you know, we will probably go into more. Well, actually, we will absolutely go into more down the road, but we are up on time. So we appreciate you coming out here. Everything is in long form video format on YouTube, and we will see you next time.
Thank y'all. Peace.